Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Washington Football Team. Now, Washington kind of falls butt backwards into the playoffs. First of all, credit the defense because the defense is legit. If you play in a high value defense league or something like that, Washington's defense is going to be like one of the top 3 defenses next year in fantasy. They're just getting better and better. Tampa Bay, I've been seeing all year, they're a team that can beat you 36-35. They're a team that can beat you 9-6, depending on the week. So if you can win both ways, I like that. You also have maybe not for the team widespread playoff pedigree, but you have at the leadership position, Tom Brady. He's been to the playoffs a few times, right? He's made a couple of deep runs. This team knows what to do. The Washington Football Team's young. But Alex Smith, dude, when was the last time Alex Smith is a starting quarterback and didn't make the playoffs? Seriously. 49ers Chiefs. Take it to the bank. Alex Smith is a starting quarterback. He makes the playoffs. By the way, as a starter this year, David, you probably know this, but for our audience doesn't. For our audience, a lot may not. The Washington Football Team, they're 7-9 this year. With Alex Smith as the starting quarterback, they're 5-1. Okay? Nobody wants to play this Washington Football Team. The defense is playing the best they've played all year. They're getting better and better. Alex Smith is 5-1 as a starting quarterback. I know their record sucks, but this is not the easiest matchup in the world for Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, meanwhile, Mike Evans, I mean, I don't love it. I tend to think he'll play, but that's why you don't necessarily go full bore, when you don't need the game. I mean, their playoff, seeding wasn't going to raise or lower with that. But let me hit you with fantasy stuff, and I'll swing it over to you, David. Tom Brady definitely is start grade for me. I have him under other guys this week, but he's startable. I'd say he's probably of the there are 6 games, so we got 12 teams playing this weekend. Of those 12 teams, I would say he's probably about number 5 this week for me. So nothing to blow the budget over, but he's startable. Running backs, I stay away from both of them against the Washington Football Team. I think this is going to be something where, maybe a Godwin, could be a guy like Antonio Brown. Mike Evans, we'll see. One of these receivers I think will break through, and I think Gronk is going to be a nightmare. For Washington, I think it's Antonio Gibson, maybe J.D. McKissick. McLaurin, I think, to your point, David, early in the season, he's matchup proof. I think you start him. But here's my concern before I swing it over to you, David, is Tampa Bay defensively. We've seen them get gashed in the secondary this year, as we did last year, but it's teams that push the ball downfield. Washington is generally a team that kind of shies away from a lot of deep shots. It's a lot of McKissick. It's a lot of short slants. It's a lot of, hit you out of the backfield. It's a lot of 5 yards, 10 yards, and up. Tampa Bay kind of excels that in those types of matchups when they can be aggressive. Washington and Scott Turner has not really shown the desire to push the ball downfield a lot. I have seen them do it, but I haven't seen them do it a lot, certainly not against Philadelphia on Sunday Night Football. So take that as it is. David, why don't you talk a little bit about this matchup and how you think it'll go?
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get to watch the Washington game last night because, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, I poisoned myself essentially with whiskey, accidentally, drank way too much, and just it was nap time after that.
Not the best decision when you're watching Sunday Night Football.
Life
decisions.
I'm not perfect, Sean.
Nobody is.
But with the Washington Football Team, I think this is a good matchup for them because I'd be worried if I'm a Tampa Bay fan because they do all of the things well to combat Tampa Bay's strengths. I do not like this as a fantasy matchup for anyone involved, just because all of the players I like, the other team's good at stopping them.
Right.
I like the Tampa Bay wideouts, but Washington right now is second in the league in passing yards per game allowed. The only team to allow less passing yards per game than the football team this year is the Rams. They're only allowing 191.8 passing yards per game. And what is Tampa Bay doing right now? Tom Brady's hot. They're passing all over people the past 2 weeks. They've just been going crazy. We'll see about Mike Evans, whether he plays, whether he's ruled out, because that will definitely make it even more difficult for Tom Brady to succeed in what's a tough matchup and make it more difficult for these wideouts. It could push more volume to Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown and get them there despite the matchup. But I'm not thrilled about it. And on the other side, I mean, you're right, Terry McLaurin, he's an auto start. But Gibson, I don't see how you could start him in any sort of playoff challenge or DFS. It's Tampa Bay. I mean, what are they known for? Shutting down the run.
Mm-hmm.
And McKissick stealing the receiving volume. Tampa Bay's only allowing 80.6 rushing yards per game. Second place is Indianapolis at 90. So 10 rushing yards less than number 2 rush defense. So it's not good for Gibson. I think this could be another, when we talk about the Rams, Seahawks, like it could be another just defensive battle. And I wouldn't expect to see the same hot Tom Brady. But again, it's playoff Tom Brady. So we're going to find out some things about just how gelled this Tampa Bay offense is and how elite Tom Brady is as a playoff performer.
I think in terms of matchup, I think where Tampa, I give a slight upgrade or, the advantage to Tampa here because they have Gronk. And, the combination of Scotty Miller and Antonio Brown can work the middle of the field a little bit better. And, of course, Antonio Brown can go over the top. We know that. But I think, kind of what you're used to seeing Tom Brady in the playoffs of working just kind of short middle and then maybe, throwing a little bit of a deeper seam to Gronk. I think that'll be there for them this week. Washington, if you're playing daily fantasy, I do think McKissick is probably the wiser start because he should be less expensive than – I haven't looked at the numbers this week, but he should be less expensive than Gibson. And I think Washington – that's kind of going to be their main means, I think, of passing the ball this week, or at least their attempt. Now, Tampa Bay is really good at stopping that screen, though, so I'm thinking that McKissick won't get a ton of yards, but he should get receptions. Man, this is – I could see anything happening here. I could see this being, 35 points or under, but I could see both teams, getting into the 20s here. I really don't know what we're going to see from both of these guys. I do know that Washington, to have a chance, needs to start fast. They did pretty well starting fast yesterday. The good thing, too, I think Washington was having some problem with Jalen Hurts. Obviously, the Philadelphia Eagles benched Hurts late in the game. He wasn't passing well, but he was kind of carving him up and run. Tom Brady's not going to carve up the Washington football team running the ball. It's a very interesting matchup. I think a lot of Tampa Bay Bucs fans who aren't necessarily dialed in to watching all the games and all the teams, they're probably seeing 7-9. Yeah, we're going to roll through them. I don't think this is a roll through. I don't, man. I think this is a kind of a danger game for Tampa, but I do think Tampa is the better team. So let me hit you with the line here, David. Tampa Bay on the road, -8 versus Washington. Who would you take?
That seems like too many points for me. I think I'm going to take Washington here. Even though I don't expect Washington to be able to put up many points, I still think their defense is good enough to cover.
I have, let's see, the computers came back, Tampa Bay 31, Washington 17. I don't like that projection. I'm not going to bet this. When I disagree with my computers, I just take it off my board. That's how I bet. That's how I save money. Because if they don't pass the eye test or the smell test, then I just remove it from my board. Me personally, I feel like it's going to be Tampa Bay 24, Washington 17. I do think Tampa Bay wins. I could see this game being in doubt in the fourth quarter. 8. If it's over a touchdown, I think that's too much for me. So I'll personally take Washington. My computers take Tampa Bay. I think it's too many points. I think this is one of these, like the Indianapolis-Buffalo game, I really don't know what we're going to get. I think it's going to be super interesting. Saturday is going to be a really interesting game because there's literally no result that would surprise me. It really wouldn't. I think some people would be okay, one result that would surprise me is the backup quarterback for the Rams if he plays like houses Seattle. It's not going to happen. But other than that, it would not shock me if Washington wins safely based on their defense. It wouldn't shock me for Tampa to completely blow out Washington. Indianapolis, Buffalo, either way. That could go either way for me. Buffalo, blowout to short. Rams, Seattle, I think, we all think these games will be relatively close, but it really would not shock me. Let's move it on to Sunday, a game near and dear to your heart, David.